this much here, so I don't feel like I'm looking the other way. So I can look you in the windows of your soul.
No, I wouldn't advise it.
So not to give you the big head, but just so the folks at home know, just one of the reasons that I love doing this podcast, especially like more recently, is because, Matt, you make the best cup of coffee. I lack the capability or the intuition to make a cup of coffee that good, and so I enjoy coming here for my weekly fix.
Glad to. It's nice to have somebody appreciate it.
Man, it warms both my soul and my esophagus as it goes down.
Very nice.
It is nice. Well, let me see if I still remember how to podcast. This is the Southern Fried Geekery podcast. It's a brand new episode. As usual, I am Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
Matt Trogdon.
And we are glad to be back with you again. I want to apologize for not being with you guys last episode, but I did listen. I put it in my earballs, and you guys did fantastic.
Nice.
Great.
Thank you.
It's always nice to, just hear you guys bounce back and forth without my undue influence, just, taking you on tangents and paths. And
it would have been nice to have your opinion about the Northman, I will say.
Well, I can't give it yet.
I know you haven't seen it.
Yeah, so solely just because it's in finals week, I got a kick yesterday. You actually sent me a text message that said I was battling the final boss, and I hadn't thought about it like that, but it's completely what's happening. So as soon as Tuesday gets here and I can get a slight twinge and taste of freedom, I will be done with the hellscape that is law school, and I will go see the Northman. I'm not even caught up on Moon Knight.
I'm not either.
Yeah, that's how just behind on everything I am.
Yeah, me
too. But I digress. This is episode 227 of this little show we do. It's a weekly podcast for those of you who may be new. Maybe you're checking us out for the first time. On normal days, we are a trio, a unholy trinity of local functional adults who also read comic books that are positioned and live in Central Arkansas. Unfortunately, our brother Craig this week has befallen to illness. He's hacking and sneezing and other ailments and woes have a hold of him. He is not. He took one of those little testy tests and tested negative, so he does not have the Rona. Miss Rona stayed home. He's just got a little. I guess it's a cold, flu, something. I don't know. He opted not to come infect us, which was mighty nice of him on his part.
Appreciated.
Yeah, handshakes, but with gloves. Fist bumps, like from across the room. So I think we got to handle this thing by ourselves. But we're going to do what we always do, right? We're going to talk about the comics that we've read. Maybe we appreciated, maybe we didn't. There were some things about them. But just to, before you work out, you got to stretch, right? You got to get your muscles loose. So let's flex a little bit. Let's get ready for this show by dropping a little short stack. Tell me about 3 things you read this past week.
One thing I read from Marvel Comics, this is Sabretooth, number 3.
I am shocked.
Aren't you, though? The writer is Victor Laval. Artist is Leonard Kirk. Colorist is Rain Burrito. Probably saying that wrong. And Corey Pettit did the letters, of course. Why wouldn't he? He's doing all of them. This is... I really, really like the character Sabretooth. I feel like he's being served really well in this story. And it's just overall, it's just a good story, period. So this is one that anybody I know that's reading it is really liking it. So I recommend that one. Also on my short stack from Boom Studios, Berserker number 8 by the one Keanu Reeves. I heard he does some things. Matt Kent does some things too, as does Ron Garney and Bill Crabtree. I continue to really dig on this story. It is getting, as the story started out, it felt like a lot of what Keanu Reeves movies are, primarily action. But as the story continues, it's getting much more nuanced and more character-driven and complex, I guess I would say. Okay. We're not talking about Watchmen here, for Christ's sake, but there's just more substance to it.
Nice.
There's a way to say it.
Very cool.
And then third on my short stack is I finished up this series from AWA Upshot, The Fourth Man by Jeff McComsey, Mike Diodato Jr., Lee Lowridge on colors, and letters by Steve Wands. I loved the way this story ended.
Okay.
I really wish there was more to this. It had an ending that's kind of open. So that was I appreciated that. As frustrating as I want there to be an issue 5 or more. I even went back and double checked. This is 4 issues. Damn it! Because I really it really makes me want to look up the story that this was based on.
Yeah.
Especially based on the ending. I'm like, holy crap.
This was because you've spoken about this, I think, a few times. This was the based on a true story, kind of the car dealership, right?
Rival car dealerships and murder plots ensue.
See, that's the kind of like real life, like stranger than fiction. Like, murder via used car salesman.
Yeah. Again, I make the comparison to Fargo. It's, got that, of course, Fargo had a dealership in it, but it's just what I mean is regular, so-and-so regular people taking a dip into the criminal world and not knowing what they're doing, and everything goes right and it bites them in the ass, yada, yada, yada. It's that kind of story.
Nice.
So, I really want to look this up.
I may get the trade. Assumedly, the trade, I haven't looked at any of the AWA trades, but for the 4-issue series, assumedly they're $15, right? Like 15 to $20.
I have no idea, yeah.
I would think so. I mean, surely you have to pick them up. If they're a full, same equivalent to a 6-issue trade, I would hope there's some back matter and stuff that flesh it out.
I mean, my money says that this is one you'll be able to get, be able to order back issues of for at or below cover price.
That's very true.
Because it's, this is a great little crime story, but how many of those shoot up in value?
Right.
And
it's a crime story that's not written by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only exception to the to the rule. I mean, even the great Darwin Cook stuff is very affordable,
which is criminal.
It's
I want that Martini collection because I don't have it. Oh, I want it so bad. It's so pretty.
Yeah,
so pretty. So, I took a pause for the cause in some of my study sessions this week to read some comics, specifically, just A, as relaxation, but B, because we got a podcast to do. But I'm about 2 weeks behind, a little over 2 weeks behind. So I'm grueling through my little stack. So, but I did check out some issues from not so long ago. The most recent one that I wanted to talk about and bring here. It's the last issue of Nita Hall's Nightmare blog. This is the spinoff from Philadelphia that I've spoken about it several times and really enjoyed. Written by Rodney Barnes and co-created by Jason Sean Alexander. And here's where your shock face comes in. It is drawn by Simon Kudaransky, with colors by Lewis or letters by Lewis NCT. So remember a few weeks ago I was like, Kudaransky's been maybe up in his game a little bit because I do not like him as an artist. He's just somebody I can't.
You've gone on record saying he should not have a job.
Yeah. And then so I read this. I'm like, well, maybe he's doing some different styles. Maybe especially working under somebody like Jason Sean Alexander. Maybe he's changed his ways. And then through the 6 issues, I've been pleasantly surprised, which is a low bar, right? And then I open this one up, and he commits the cardinal sin of drawing bullets firing out of the gun with the gun casing, and I'm back to just being done with that person as an entity.
So you're dropping the series?
It's over now.
Oh, so, okay.
If they pick it back up, I'll be curious to see if he's the artist on it, which he might. Look, I'm joking. One panel, one mishap that is like a constant in comics is not necessarily the thing that's going to make me hate, but it's just that drives me crazy.
That is a pet peeve I have as well.
Yeah, he is not alone in that. I usually take pictures of that stuff and post it whenever it happens because it's just dumb.
So we also need to call out Mr. Greg Tumbarello on that as well.
Oh, do we? Okay,
yeah, we do. He is the editor.
Oh, yep. See, you got to catch that. That there's no excuses for that. That's not how bullets work, kids.
Yeah, that's you didn't you're not backing up your team there, bro.
Yeah, no, you can't let that one slide. But it's just annoying when that happens. It is always a pet peeve of mine. So second on my short stack, we're going to bounce over to the House of Ideas, Avengers number 55. Again, on record, not having been in love with Jason Aaron's Avengers. This was a fun issue. I really enjoyed this issue. I was surprised. So there's 2 things that happen in this issue that I think are really cool and worth noting. Darkhawk, or Nighthawk, becomes the Marvel character, becomes an Avenger. So from the society, that's
kind of easy to be an Avenger these days.
Man, they're passing out. But T'Challa resigns as team leader, as chairman, and so they are going up against Mephisto. So they need to fill the ranks. So they reach out and get our buddy to join. But also they go up against the Serpent Society. And the Serpent Society, because they're working against Mephisto, which I always kind of love when the Serpent Society shows up, just because they're weird, fun characters. They've been co-opted by Mephisto, so this is not the Serpent Society who takes like hostages and gets easily foiled. They're all insane and literally murdering people. Like apparently they had went legit for a little bit, and the Serpent Society had started up like a whatever for hire business. And then one day they just go crazy and they start working their way up the high rise on a murder parade, and the Avengers have to get involved. But yeah, this was a fun little issue. I should say, obviously, it's written by Jason Aaron. Javier Garron does the pencils on it, and who did? Let's see. David Curiel did the colors, and Corey Pettit, that guy, wrote some letters, all of them. So as he tends to do, and then over at Black Hammer, the title is comfort food to me. Anytime I see Black Hammer, it's my happy place. It's a warm, fuzzy, snuggly blanket. Issue 11 of Black Hammer Reborn came out. And this is, you're really starting to see the loop come through. I'm not spoiling anything, but this issue takes, you're dealing with the original Black Hammer's daughter who took up the mantle. She's now older, gotten married with kids, and put her hammer up. Something happens in this issue. Colonel Weird comes in with his little ray gun, and it lives up to his namesake. Things get weird, but it loops around to the very beginning and the inception of the Black Hammer series. Knocked my socks off. I loved it. Caitlin Yarsky is just drawn beautiful images in this book. They're great.
Nice.
And one of the main characters who was the modern Black Hammer's husband. Is just kind of a washed up, pudgy old white guy with like a half receding hairline, and she just leans into the joke like his gap gets bigger as it goes on. So it was fun. It was all of which were easy reads. Especially going back into Nita Hall's, it's a great horror story. It's monsters. All of it just easily digestible and was kind of what I was looking for in those moments where I could just grab a book in between annoying study sessions and get back on with my life. Kind of like a palate cleanser, if you will.
Yeah.
Which is what I look for, especially when you're having a busy day. So
yeah.
Well, you ready to talk about some comics?
Ready.
Let's bounce one back and forth across from each other. As per usual, Matt and I, and actually Craig was involved in this too before he got ill. He came down with the sickness. Don't look at me in that tone of voice. We got together. Craig is usually the first one at the comic shop for the week. He is able to get up there before we can, and he usually sends us a list of what new number ones or what jump on points are out there. And so he sent us one this week. He sent us a couple of them, I decided let's get off the beaten path for a second, because some were Marvel, some were DC, some were an Image number one or whatever. But a new book came out this week. It's called Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. Actually, there's a Godzilla Rivals is the name of is the title of the series, and this one he is going up against the Great Ghidorah. And so I said, hey, that's like, it's a Godzilla story. It's a little pricey. It's $8. We get a discount at our comic shop, but it's a little bit thicker than a normal comic. So let's check this out. It's written by a couple of Adams, Adam Gorham and Adam Guzawiski, with design and letters by Nathan Wittick, edited by Megan Brown. So, I should say Adam Gorham wrote and drew this. Adam Guzawiski was just the colors. I thought he did the art and the colors. So before we crack this nut open and get into the meat of it, the heart of it, kind of what did you think about this? 'Cause I feel like this is one of those times where you and I are going to diverge on separate paths.
I didn't think it was ill executed. I thought the art was really well done. I just felt like this was super generic.
Did you?
I just felt like it's a super generic Godzilla. In fact, I felt like it was just a generic monster kaiju story. Didn't do anything for me. I didn't feel like there was any reason to care about any of the people in this.
Yeah.
It just felt like everybody was just playing a role, and it just felt super surface level to me.
Okay.
It just didn't do anything for me at all.
So I had a little bit of the opposite experience. I went in expecting this to be just kind of what I would think was a generic Godzilla story. Something happens, there's a monster, he rises up. And there were a few twists and turns in the story that we will get to later that kind of took me off guard. I wasn't expecting it. And inevitably where I landed to is I had to reassert the way I viewed the book and the way I approached the book, and not think of it necessarily as a Godzilla book, but kind of think of it as a almost like a late 70s, mid 80s manga. One of those, kind of like Ultraman, where the science patrol thing's happening. And when I viewed it through that lens, it really opened up some like narrative doors and some connectivity to stuff before, and just walked me through. So I really found myself enjoying this in a way that I was not expecting to, because it took me off guard for the exact opposite reason. It defied my expectations. It's still very surface level. I 100% agree with that. Like it's not digging into any moralisms. It's not character driven. It is mostly just straight up plot driven. But still, again, from what I was looking for this week, and the fact that it took some left turns, I actually ended up having a lot of fun with it. So kind of let's talk about this. Let's dig in and talk about what this is. The story opens up in Tokyo, 1996, and Mars is attacked. So, oh no, ray guns and flying saucers, and they're blowing up the world. And everybody's going crazy because, the Martians, and they're not called Martians in this, they have a different name, have just unleashed hell. And, they've essentially, using their little laser beams, cue Dr. Evil voice, they have blown up all the governments in the world, all the seats of government. Some of the last few standing they're staging an assault, but they're very ineffective. They're not able to break through. You see there's one lone fighter pilot who comes out in the very beginning of the story, who is just an ace. This is an ace pilot. They are just whipping in and out of these saucers, firing, and they're making some not really headway, but they're it's basically just trying to do death by 1,000 cuts at this point, but very inefficient type of warfare. They're losing, but they have no other choice. They're kind of making a last stand. When all of a sudden the water in Tokyo Bay starts to boil and bubble and dribble up, and somebody from home base calls this fighter pilot saying, "Hey, we're getting some seismic activity over the bay." And she's like, "Well," the fighter pilot's like, "Well, yeah, that's where all the action is." They're like, "No, underneath the bay." And as you might expect from the title of a said book, Gojira himself jumps up. You cue that roar from the movie that we all love so much. And Godzilla just comes out of nowhere and just starts, not really sure what Godzilla's doing, because again, Godzilla is not a moralistic creature. It's not picking sides, so it just starts swiping at whatever it senses the danger is, whatever it can sense the radiation in. And our fighter pilot has got some history with Godzilla. They don't like Godzilla at all. In fact, this fighter pilot, who, without bearing the lead, the fighter pilot's this young woman. Godzilla, in a previous event, emergence, caused the death of her family. So there's some bad blood there. She wants to, disengage with the Martians, who are wreaking global havoc, and drop a missile down Godzilla's throat. But, Godzilla starts ripping and roaring at the Martians itself. So these aliens are, they're also not sure what's happening. They've been kind of... It seems to be like the people actually in the spaceships, the actual Martian fighters themselves, were not expecting this. And so they get ripped in half. But as you read on the book, you find that there is some machinations happening behind the scenes, and Martian high command, whatever you want to call them, they knew this. They were looking for this. They were counting on this happening. And so they take actions, and Godzilla gets abducted. Godzilla is the victim of an alien abduction, and he's taken back to Mars, or Zilia, as these folks call the planet. And the humans kind of just are left to regather themselves. Our fighter pilot, crash lands because she gets hit by a random ray and lands, and so she gets rescued, picked up, and they go back to kind of reconnoiter, get their beings about them, and something has happened. Because of the Zillion threat, the Martian threat, previous quote unquote villainy no longer matters, right? Like, to a sense, like at some point when you come to an extinction level event, you can think of it as DC, like Superman and Lex Luthor are going to work together if they need to save the planet, even though they've battled each other for 100 times. Well, there's this guy, this doctor, an evil doctor, white coat, doing everything but stroking a white cat, and his name's Doctor Who, and he is previously viewed as a villain. He's tried to take over and conquer the world. Of course, from his point of view, he just tried to reassert the world and taken some better actions. But he has, the world leaders have come to him and said, hey, like, you've got a big brain. We need to start thinking of a way out of this. What can we do? And so they've joined forces with this, evil, seemingly maniacal science villain. And he also comes complete with a robot sidekick who is this little, a young-looking man droid, kind of teenager-ish, but he's named this little robot Hoshi. And the cool thing about Hoshi is able to, or has been able to, hijack the Martian waves, the radio waves that the Martians are using. And so he has got some insight to their history, their culture, and their plan. So he knows a little bit about what's going on and why they would want to hijack Godzilla. So a plan is formed. And our young space pilot is going to take this new high-tech, never-before-flown ship along with Hoshi, and they are going to blast themselves to Mars to go drop electro bombs on the Zillion/Martian High Command. Like they're gonna take, very much like an Independence Day scene, right? They're going right to the heart of the beast, and they're going to just wreak havoc. Meanwhile, on Zillia, the reason that they have brought Godzilla to Mars, the reason that they were looking for such a creature, is because there is a culture of almost gladiator combatants in Zillion culture. They have the arena, except they don't use people, they use monsters of all sorts. Godzilla is there, and they've actually they've put a dog collar on him, so to speak. They have put a device on Godzilla that will not let him use his nuclear breath. And when you first see him, he is battling a couple of like praying mantis type creatures. He's successful ultimately, and he's essentially risen through the ranks. As it's time for Godzilla to face the final boss. Of course, Zillia has their own monster, rooted, I guess, in their own history, which is kind of a retcon, right? But it's King Ghidorah, who is essentially, in this story, as it's told, a Martian creature, and unless they were able to like kidnap King Ghidorah and bring him there. But they call him Monster Zero, so like he's the first, and they get to fight. Cue the let them fight voiceover from the movie. But our team, this young fighter pilot, who is again adept, really hates Godzilla, but is just an adept fighter pilot. They make it. They make it to Mars, and they've got their bomb, and they're getting ready to drop it. And then something happens, and our robot buddy glitches. Because, the Zillions, the Martians, they're not stupid. And they kind of suspected what was going to happen. And so they planted some saboteur seeds there. Mm-hmm. So, despite the fact that the cover says one shot right up there in the left-hand corner, you see where it says one shot?
I did see that.
What does that denote to you, Matt?
Usually means one shot. Not two.
Yeah, it means that there's not going to be an issue. But, just in the sense of misdirection, next issue, you see Godzilla getting ready to fight a giant mech.
Mm-hmm. So, and on the left-hand page, what's it say at the bottom?
It says the end. Mm. So, essentially, this is one of those things that is going to be the kickoff of a series. It feels like a zero issue, and maybe that's why.
Seems like they should have called it that.
Yeah, so I'm a little... I mean, like, we're joking and being very lighthearted about it, but I'm a little confused about what's going on here. Legitimately, like I don't know if there's going to be a, it says Godzilla Rivals. Is there going to be a new series that spins out of this? And this is just like a one-shot pause. Is that just a misdirection? Was this planned to be a series and they just didn't think it was going to go off, and so they scrapped it but didn't change anything?
Why did they charge $8 for it? That's the biggest question overall.
That's look, that is not a insurmountable amount of money.
For what again, this is not like a prestige format.
No.
I mean, it's basically just barely an oversized.
It's an oversized issue, but it's not.
Yeah.
When I said earlier, it's the misdirection of the Martians or the Zillions that actually grabbed me by the collar and was like, oh, this is something I haven't seen before. Godzilla being abducted and taken to another space, another place in space to be used as a monster in monster gladiatorial events. Like I haven't read a lot. I have not read a lot of Godzilla. I also have not spoken much today, apparently. So I don't know if this has ever happened before, but that misdirection really threw me for a loop. And then you add in the sensibility, like I said, those early manga sensibilities of, it made me think of Ultraman with them running the brand new plane, the state of the art high tech stuff, or even books like Captain Harlock, like way back in the day. Like it reminded me of like the way of the pacing and the art, how it connected to it, and having that this old maniacal figure or old figure at all connected to like this young pilot. Like there were so many elements of that I felt like it was rooted in that. It was inspired. I mean, there's a fine line between inspiration and derision. But that I found intriguing. So I was able to read this and be like, okay, there's something else here. But it sounds like you didn't have that experience at all.
No, not at all. Yeah. But I take no pleasure in tearing things down.
No, for sure.
Not just
I thought it was a fun take on it. I thought it was something that personally I had never seen before. And people who are more astute and studied in the Godzilla lore, the monster lore than I am, or they may have. I don't know. It kind of reminded me in the fact that I didn't get what I expected in the way that you remember Mars Attacks?
I do.
From a few not the film, but the comic series done a few years ago.
Yeah.
We picked that book up not because we love Mars Attacks, but because we love the writer and the artist that did that book. And I was not expecting what I got out of that book either. It threw me for some loops. And this kind of did that same thing. Maybe not as well. Not even maybe. It just didn't do it as well. But I'm trying to give some credit here, but it still gave me it was a different flavor than what I was expecting. And in that, I found there to be some intrigue that I could latch onto and look into the mechanics of what it was doing and how it was working. So it was fun. I enjoyed it. Now, I will say, I thought the art was great.
Mm-hmm.
But uneven in spots. It almost switched up its style. I don't want to use the word inconsistent because I don't think that's fair, but I think it blends styles. When I first opened this up and I looked at those initial pages, it kind of has this Daniel Warren Johnson vibe to it a little bit.
Bright colors, dynamic,
sketchy. There are no just hard lines. Like everything looks like it was drawn with a piece of like chiseled charcoal or something like that. And then as you go on through the story, that kind of goes away for a more classic style. Once you start to see Doctor Who, and I can't decide if it's just the coloring but I don't think it is. I think it's the inking. Like once you get to the layer and you start seeing the people inside, it goes to a more traditional, almost like again like kind of that Captain Harlock vibe of traditional cartooning. There's still a manga influence there. Like there's still that resonance, but it's not the same as you saw in those opening pages. Like it's
that felt intentional to me because you're seeing it's a different kind of delivery between the monster presentation and the human presentation.
I thought so as well until you get to the actual fighting arena of Zillia, and I feel like it carried more over of that like hardened line in that classic style. I didn't see the and again I'm using the name just because it's who it reminds me of. I didn't see the Daniel Warren Johnson influence come back until you get the double page spread, and there is a gorgeous double page spread in here of Godzilla fighting King Ghidorah. And it kicked back into that style for me, at least in the way that I view it. And so it really did feel like I feel like Adam Gorin probably, and I'd love to talk to him about this. He probably loves Godzilla.
Oh, it says so in the back of the back matter.
I didn't have time to read the back matter.
Yeah.
It seems like he had a lot of fun and put in a lot of energy, like just physical kinetic energy into the monsters fight pages. And it seems like he reasserted and maybe just redrew the pages that it didn't feel like it was fun for him. But you can tell when he's having fun. You can tell when he's really moved by whatever scene his pencil is giving birth to. And I love when that happens because you can just it does something to the flavor of the story. But no, all in all, I'm gonna have to keep my eye out for this and see what it's gonna do because again, is this a one shot or is there a next issue?
It clearly indicates it's not a one shot. That the next issue he's got another opponent. The Adventures of Godzilla.
It does, but then it also clearly indicates that it's the end. It's one shot. I feel like I'm being told two things.
Yeah, it clearly says two things.
Yeah, it's very like I need to know. This is a yes or a no question. This is not a maybe
multiple choice.
So I don't know, man. And always with these monster stories, I like the focus when they get to focus on the humans. And I mean, we're thrown in media res into this. Like you get a little bit of the background with the fighter pilot, and why we're supposed to care that her family was killed, and why she hates Godzilla, and the relationship with Hoshi the little robot. Hoshi the little robot ended up being my favorite character in the story, just because that dude tries real hard. He's working against an algorithm and learning how to be a person. In part of the story, at least that's the vibe that it wants you to feel, but. Yeah, I thought it was fun. So I am, $8 cover price aside, because I don't feel, just flat out, just full honesty, I don't feel like it's worth $8. That cover price aside, I'm happy we read this. I'm happy we picked it up. So and have you read much Godzilla as far as comics go? Are you?
No.
Yeah, I'm not either. I never really got into those stories. I mean, I've watched the films, especially like Godzilla v Kong. I've seen those and I thought they were, great action movies, but other than just a base level knowledge, it's something I always want to look more into, but then when I do read the stories, typically they leave me with just kind of, okay, yeah, this was exactly what I expected. And I'm not in love with it from the basis to have that, like you give me a Conan story that's exactly what I expected, then I'm okay with that. Because I'm in love with the character at its base. Like, I'm in love with the root of that character.
Yeah.
I don't have that relationship with Godzilla, so if you give me just a standard Godzilla story, it doesn't move me the way another thing would.
Certainly doesn't me.
Yeah, so. But, I mean, that is what it is. Before we talk about some comics that we read this week, there was a couple of different pieces of sad news that popped up this past week. And I don't know if you saw this one or not, but Scott Mcleod, who wrote what is to me one of the quintessential understandings of comics. It's one of those things that I've always said, if you want to know comics, if you want to know the language of comics, if you want to think about comics on a higher level, you should read Understanding Comics by Scott Mcleod. Unfortunately, his wife was killed in a car wreck.
Oh my gosh.
She, from the story I got, they were on their way, or she was on the way to their daughter's graduation.
Oh my god.
And she was killed in a car wreck. So we want to send, for those of you who are fans of the show and stuff, we just want to acknowledge that and send out compassion and heartfelt thoughts to the Mcleod family. I don't know if they're doing anything, but that's just terrible. And,
yeah.
So, and for me, Scott Mcleod is he's a pinpoint in my comics journey, to use Pinterest phrases. And so when I saw that, it just broke my heart a little bit. I mean, it would break my heart for anybody, but it's because it's Scott Mcleod. And then more, I don't think you can say expectedly, because I don't think it was expected, but anytime an elderly person passes away, it's a little bit more expected than not. But Neil Adams, the great Neil Adams, left the planet. He was done. He put down his pencil this past week and took off. And so it's interesting. I've been gearing up for a quote unquote comic celebrity death, right? Because we know it's coming down the line. We know George Perez is going to pass away. He's fighting cancer, but he's not fighting cancer. He's just enjoying his last days. So like I've been gearing myself up for that moment.
Yeah.
And when I saw the news that Neil Adams had died, it really just took a swing. Like it was a punch I didn't see coming. And it made me. I was really surprised at how it made me feel. Like I found myself going and looking at the Neil Adams work that I have as far as the books and stuff and reliving those moments because I don't have the connection to Neil Adams that I think a lot of people do. So, and this isn't one of those not appreciating things because I truly 100% appreciate his legacy and everything. But he wasn't making comics when I started reading comics, right? Like, so it was it's kind of like appreciating Schuster or appreciating Kirby or the people who created the medium. They were done making comics for the most part by the time my generation came around, so you truly have to appreciate it through the lens of their historical input. For me, that's the way I view it. And just a solid and quintessential person to the medium as far as superhero comics go, and for creator rights in general. The work aside, the stories aside that he created, the look that he gave, the style that he is so associated with that he really put his stamp on, and that became the style of quote unquote comics. I mean, how many Neil Adams clones out there were? I mean, Bill Sienkiewicz when he started was just a Neil Adams clone, and then look where he went and did. But he was a figure who laid a foundation. But again, did so much work behind the scenes to make sure that people got paid for what they did. And for somebody, we always talk about that. We always talk about you deserve the fact that the United States doesn't have moral rights the way that the rest of the world does in copyright law. Neil Adams stood up for those folks and got a lot of folks paychecks they would not have gotten otherwise. And in his later years, we all kind of scoffed at him as far as his attitude goes. And
I never scoffed at Neil Adams. I'll say a lot of people used to do that. I was never one of them.
Okay, that's fine. I was I'm not like I'll 100%. Like his just the way he presented himself. The man had an ego and he earned his ego. Like you can't say he didn't earn his ego, but he was a little crazy. And so, but that was part of a character I think that he had developed for himself and put out there, but. It really left a big hole because he is a foundational person in comics. Yeah,
I never punched down at Neil Adams like I thought a lot of people did because it's just real easy to forget he was a giant of the industry, and he was hugely influential in the industry. He changed the industry in so many ways. Him and some of the things he would say, and that people would scoff at him because he. Had a big ego, I always thought was super silly. And, I'll make the comparison to Frank Frazetta. Nobody had a bigger opinion of themselves than Frank Frazetta. Yeah. Frank Frazetta had an ego that wouldn't fit in the room. So, I mean, he did amazing work that I never get tired of looking at. And the same thing was for Neil Adams. Yeah. Only difference is Neil Adams did more interviews.
Yeah.
It's the only difference between the way those two guys talk. If you listen to both of them talk, now, the thing about Neil Adams that separates himself is he did so much for other people.
Right.
I mean, he talked about himself a lot. Can't say as much he said about himself that I disagreed with, but he never waited for compliments. He gave them to himself, but he pulled other people up with him.
Yeah.
And he didn't punch down at people. He didn't beat up on people.
No, he punched up at corporations.
He punched up, and he loved comics. He put the comic book medium on a pedestal long time before it was cool to do so. Long time before it was cool to do so. I love going and listening to his interviews. One, he's just a great storyteller. He's an excellent storyteller. But he talks about, going back, and there's a great interview. He did 2 great interviews with Kevin Smith a long time ago when Kevin Smith first started his podcast. And him talking about when he got into the industry.
Was that the Fat Man on Batman? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, I've heard that interview. Yeah. I've listened to it.
Great interview. That one stuck with me. him talking about getting into the industry, and everybody, he'd go talk to because what was interesting about Neal Adams that we lost is we lost a guy who was there back when the golden era guys were still active. He was coming in when the golden era guys were still drawing.
Right.
And him talking about those guys telling him, he's like, why do you want to do this? We're about to go out of business. And he got into this industry when all indications were it wasn't going to be an industry.
Yeah.
And, put yourself in that position. I mean, he loved it that much. He was willing to go in and dedicate himself to it when the clear indication was it wasn't going to be around in the very near future.
I think there were a lot of parallels between he and Roy Thomas in that sense, in the fact that who they were connected to and how they got into the industry. Obviously, Roy Thomas was a little bit more proactive from the editorial sense, and less from, and as a writer. And I would argue that Roy Thomas was more of a company guy.
Oh, absolutely.
But I still think that they had some of the same views on that early on. But just as far as like people who are alive now that are still, that can tell memories of what it was like to work with
the golden era guys,
with those folks. There's not many left.
No,
Shaken, maybe.
Yeah. Shaken's one, definitely. Yeah, there's not many left. Because Neal Adams was 81 years old when he passed. So, I was not surprised when he passed because I knew he had been hospitalized with sepsis. So I actually kept checking the news, frankly, looking for updates with him because an 80-year-old coming down with sepsis, man, that's
it's not good.
That's a bad.
It's a bad road. Sepsis in general is hard to come back from somebody who's young and I hate to use the word able-bodied because I know plenty of elderly people who are able-bodied, but when your body is young and able to recover faster, sepsis is hard to bounce back from. So, but condolences to the family, and condolences to comic fans, people who our buddy Bill Zanowitz. Neal Adams was his favorite artist of all time, and this rocked him hard. And it's one of those situations. It's always interesting to think about how we connect with creators, and this I think it's true for music too.
Yeah. Well, he put so much into what he did before a lot of people did that. Mm-hmm. You definitely had people of his time that did, but he was just one of the few that put so much thought into what he was doing. And again, this was before it was what it is today. This is back when it was and these things were 10 cents a piece, and the market was 12-year-olds. It wasn't what it is today.
They were disposable, and there was no royalties.
So you go back and look at his Batman work. It's amazing to look at still, but especially within that context. And it's just his respect for the whole medium and creators specifically is something that I've always really appreciated.
So, that leads to my next question. And you just mentioned Batman. Is Batman kind of how you remember Neal Adams? Is that as far as his work goes? Is that
that's what he's going to always be associated with and remembered for above anything else, because that's where he made the first biggest impact. You got to remember he and Denny O'Neil are the ones that brought Batman out of the campy area and put him back into the Dark Knight era. And that's where he had the biggest and most impact back in the day. That's really going to be his legacy outside of, as far as what he did on the page. He the impact he did off the page is arguably a bigger legacy for creators' rights.
So for me, it's a toss-up between, it includes Batman, but it's the Brave and the Bold. So the Neal Adams Brave and the Bold stuff that I've read of his is just some of the best, most pure-hearted DC stuff ever. But then there's also his Green Lantern, Green Arrow stuff. And it's funny to me because, he's done Marvel stuff. He's worked for other companies. He's done all kinds of books, but it really is his Green Lantern work that for me is his DC work. That solidifies his
absolutely.
Legacy, and really set the stage for the house style. Him and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez really they are who I think of when I think of DC character designs, is Neil Adams and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. There was also that thing that he did in Dark Horse Presents that didn't land, but it's one of those things. He reaches out and he had his hands in so many things. So, no, man, I think that they just recently put out a Brave and the Bold omnibus with this stuff. I need to go pick that up because it's some good stuff. So, well, all right. Let's get back and talk about the actual books. What makes these things the medium that we love? What did you read this past week? Because you've got an interesting looking thing sitting over there.
So I read a collection called The Taxidermist. The creative team on this is John Wagner, Alan Grant, Ian Gibson, Trevor Harrison, and Cam Kennedy. Okay. This is a collection from the 2000 AD comic book based out of England. This is a collection of comic strips in that magazine from the late 80s, early and mid 90s. This is so 2000 AD.
Oh, is it?
The Taxidermist is about an old man named Sardini who is a human taxidermist. He only taxiderms, that's probably not a word, human beings. Because in the far future, 2080s, that is a thing people do to memorialize their friends and family as they have them stuffed and mounted. Just like you would say, maybe you just want to do the head and neck and hang it on the wall to remember your nephew. That is a thing people do. Maybe you want a full body. That is a thing you do.
I'm uncomfortable.
It's also, and what the story is about. First of all, the main artists in this, the big two, Cam Kennedy does, some of this, but most of this is done by Ian Gibson. Both of these artists I absolutely love. Cam Kennedy especially. Cam Kennedy's an interesting one. He's another one of these examples to where when he inks himself, it just is just dynamite looking. When somebody else inks him, it just does not have the gravity at all whatsoever. Okay. He normally inks himself. And he inked most of his own stuff in this. It looks like he did bring in another inker, but they did a great job. He did some work in Marvel Comics where somebody else inked him, and it does not deliver like Cam Kennedy's art normally does. You can tell, the layouts, but the boy, does the line work ever change. But anyhow, the story starts out, this taxidermist, Jacob Sardini, he runs his own private human taxidermy business. And he's visited by a mob boss whose 3 sons were recently killed in a mob war. And he wants him to stuff and mount them. And also do animatronics. That is another thing you can do in this setting, is you can have your stuffed loved ones animated.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, Jacob Sardini is a traditionalist, and he doesn't want anything to do with animatronics. He thinks
that's where he draws the line.
He draws the line. That's absurd. Everything else is art. That's absurd to him. So, of course, when the mob godfather makes a request, it's not so much a request. And he's got to do this on the lowdown. This is illegal. Getting a human being stuffed, you have to go through proper channels and it has to be licensed. Well, these are people that were killed in committing a crime, and now somebody's asking you to stuff and mount them for free. So he's breaking the law in Judge Dredd's world. This is set in Judge Dredd's world, by the way, in Mega City 1.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought you were just saying you were connecting it to that as like tonally.
No, this is Mega City 1. I should have mentioned that. And so he's this old man scared to death. One, that he's going to fail, and that the godfather is going to be unhappy with how he stuffed and mounted and animated his sons. So he is working in the middle of the night to make this happen. Meanwhile, the godfather decides he's going to take revenge for his sons being killed, goes to war. Judge Dredd and company show up, kill everybody involved. Very coldly, I might add. Dredd just out and out executes him. Says, "So much for the war." It's a pretty great scene. Anywho, So Jacob Sardini gets note. I mean, he just did all this work under, terrorized conditions only to find out that his unwanted customer, has been killed. So now he's got to dispose of this evidence. So he does so, almost gets caught. Well, the story goes on. Apparently this was a big hit when it came out, this character. Mm-hmm. So since the audience demanded more, a whole series that made up for a pretty sizable collection of human taxidermy was done. The art was taken over by Ian Gibson, who I don't think I've bought anything that Ian Gibson had done. His artwork's really, really good too. Mm-hmm. It's just, it fits in that 2000 AD style. The 2000 AD's got its own style.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And it just looks great in that. And so the story, basically, it's a long form story of this old man being recruited to, again, stuff another person in this mega city world. This next person, he's visited upon his old rival. His old rival has died, and his old rival's daughter comes to him and says he would only want you to stuff and mount him.
Right.
And he's like, oh, what an honor, yada, yada, yada. So he goes on to do so. And they're describing, his old rival was a German man who he hit prominence when he entered the Olympics, when what's called the Mega Olympics decided to include human taxidermy as a game. Apparently, in the far future, people were quite bored with the traditional Olympics, so they added things like human taxidermy, burping contests,
yes, shot put found its way out the door,
sexcapades, yeah, and so on. They had to really go lowbrow in the Olympics to keep people interested, which is a funny commentary. I think.
I mean, considering where society's going, that might not be too.
Not so much a stretch, is it?
No.
So. I mean, think if Howard Stern ran the Olympics. So do
I have to?
So that is the context I would put it in. So this German taxidermist rose to prominence when he won the gold at the Olympics for his quote recreation, and I'll show you, of Hitler's birth. And his representation of Hitler's birth is quite the scene.
Oh, yeah, that is a way to put it.
Quite the scene. So, yeah, you'll have to look that up, kids, to see what I'm talking about.
Somebody's search history is about to get real weird.
Oh, man. Yeah, it is something else, man. So the story, I mean, this is just a collection of his adventures of going, of trying to win the Olympics as he's recruited back into them. Problem is, part of the Olympics is animation, which he despises.
Right.
So that's a battle that he has. It's just, this encapsulates the absolute bonkers wackiness of 2000 AD as a publication back in the day anyway, before it got so, what I feel is really watered down. It's a good example of John Wagner's sense of humor. Mm-hmm. I love John Wagner's writing. I love his stuff. And it's a great illustration of his sense of humor, no doubt about it. Him and Alan Grant, they do this really, really well. And those two were an inseparable team for a long time. So, most of the artwork is done by Ian Gibson. There is some Cam Kennedy stuff. That's what really led me to buy this, because I've just been on this Cam Kennedy kick. I've been looking for collections that he's done. But there's an artist in the, that finished up the series, this Trevor Harrison and Alan Craddock. Man, I'd never seen these guys. These guys' artwork is really good.
Trevor's really good.
I mean, I love this dread. I mean, man, that's great. I'd never seen his artwork before that I could ever recall. So the beginning and the end, as far as the artwork goes, is my absolute favorite. Definitely not to take anything away from Ian Gibson. The color, Ian Gibson's work is colored in here, and I really would have liked to have seen the black and whites. I really like the black and white 2000 AD artwork more than anything. Cam Kennedy's black and white artwork is just outstanding. So yeah, interesting random find that I found myself reading, unlike anything else. So, if you're a 2000 AD fan, this is a great representation of that.
So Trevor Harrison, I've seen some of his work before, but it was more over in Marvel or in DC. So he did Deceased Dead Planet, probably most recently with Tom Taylor.
Okay.
That's him. But he did a lot of like Valiant stuff too. I know he did some like Exo Manowar. He did some X-Men work. Red Hood and the Outlaws, he did some of that. So there's he did a lot of the deceased work. I'm not sure if he did all of that series, but that was part of his.
That'd be why I'm unfamiliar. I haven't read any of those.
That's actually for a outside of continuity horror story. It's good. You know, Tom Taylor's having fun, just telling absurd stories. I think you would like it. You know, if you can ever get your hands on a collection, you just gotta, it's not canonical. It is a what if story with zombies. But it's fun. So I'm always curious. You were talking about just the iconic look of 2000 AD, the art that came from that world. How it each of those artists have their own thing that they're doing, but there's a connection there. There's a connectivity between them that makes it kind of 2000 AD. I know in the past they have tried to other artists have tried to bring that style to other places that aren't 2000 AD. Case in point, there's been some Marvel books that were done in a 2000 AD style. How do you feel when they do that? Like, do you think it can work? Do you think or is it so just tethered to being 2000 AD that it's hard to happen?
I mean, I certainly think it can work if they'll just, if editorial will just let them do what they do.
Yeah.
I went back and read, I mentioned it on the show, an old Punisher series that Cam Kennedy, came over and worked with Garth Ennis. Yeah. Not the Cam Kennedy that I appreciate so much. Somebody else inked him. That was an obvious problem. But those guys didn't go back and forth very much at all. Whenever by and large, Karen Berger, recruited all the 2000 AD creators, they would go and not come back. Frankly, most of that was writers. The artists didn't by and large go. Like Kevin O'Neill is one that pops out. He's an old school 2000 AD artist. He came over and did he did a little bit of stuff with Marvel. Of course, he did the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen book, which was outstanding. So that being outside the 2000 AD realm, the martial law stuff was outside of 2000 AD. That his artwork looked amazing. So it certainly can work. I mean, I just feel like those guys can frankly do anything. It's just a matter of editorial letting them do it, and them again having the right team, whether that be somebody that inks them regularly or them inking themselves. And again, the 2000 AD of old was black and white. And they've got so many of those guys have this style where it just, I don't know, personal preference obviously looks so much better in black and white.
It does. Yeah. No, I agree. And I love color. Like, I'm not one of those.
I do too. Yeah. And I don't want everything I read to be in black and white, but there's certainly artists that I appreciate more in black and white. No doubt about it.
I'm trying to remember if Carlos Esquerra ever branched over.
He did. Carlos, he did some one shots from the Preacher series.
Oh, that's right. No, yeah.
He did some Preacher stuff. That's the first thing I think of that Carlos Esquerra did.
He didn't do the like the flashback with the Spirit of Vengeance. Was that him?
I don't recall that.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, he's one of those artists that I think looks great in black and white.
Absolutely.
I don't need to see him colored.
Yeah. It's some of those, collections, Judge Dredd collections later on, or reprints that they sold as quality comics, is the early days in computer coloring. And one of the worst fucking things you'll ever see is somebody tried to computer color a Dredd strip that Carlos Esquerra did. It's fucking terrible looking. Oh,
I mean, I know you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, but that egg didn't need to be broke.
No, I mean, you don't need to break eggs with this. I mean, I realized computer coloring was new doesn't mean when you look at it, when it looks like shit, you can't go, wow, we need to just do this the old-fashioned way. Somebody's like, and printed it. Fuck you. I mean, you don't get a pass because it's new, because plenty of people were doing it and it looked good.
But it's cutting edge, man.
Oh, God, yeah.
Well, all right. Well, I'm going to bring us back up to a little bit of a current time. This past week, a new book came out from Image Comics. As I have said before, I'm a kind of a stan or a mark, if you will, for vampire books. I tend to, if I see a vampire book, I'm going to pick it up. I love them. They're one of my favorite monsters, them and werewolves. I'm fairly simple that way. But the book that came out this past week is called Bloodstained Teeth. It's written by Christian Ward, drawn by Patrick Reynolds, colors by Heather Moore, and letters by Hassan Atsmain Elahu. The first couple of sentences of the book really sets the stage for what the story is. There are two types of vampire in the world. One is born and one is made. So it really branches out to this idea of natural, quote unquote, born vampires and as a predatory species, and vampires that are passed almost like virally. You're bitten and you're infected and you become a vampire. In this world, the natural born vampires are the elite, right? Like they are they've been alive. They're all eternal, so they've been alive forever, and they copulate naturally in some weird way that's not explained yet. But they have they have the ability to create new vampires without biting them, so just like a natural birth. But it doesn't really explain that. But they're the bourgeoisie, right? Like they've got the money. They are the upper crust of the class. Control everything, the government and everything else.
Dicks.
Yeah, right. They're assholes. Bram Stoker is literally a firstborn vampire in this who created Dracula just like as a misdirection. He's like, no, if we make it if we make it fiction, then we can hide, which is smart, right? But there's a vampire called Atticus Sloane, and he's a firstborn, and he's a bastard. He is just an asshole, and he commits sin number one in vampirism. He goes and he makes new vampires. He makes this class of vampire. They're called SIPs in this, SIP, that are, they're bitten. They were mortal. They were human. They were created to be vampires, not born to be vampires. And these are, the elitists who are part of the firstborn. They tend to think of these people or these vampires as being like, dirty bloods. They're not pure, they're not whole, and they should be destroyed. And it's actually a crime in vampire law to make them. But Atticus Sloane, as I said earlier, is a bastard.
It's a crime.
Yeah.
How's that crime enforced?
If they find out you're making little other new vampires, little SIPs, they come hunt you down, and they will eliminate the SIP, and B, they will punish you in ways up to and including, I think, capital punishment. And that's actually where a lot of the story takes place. That's actually a lot of the plot of the story, because Atticus is going around. He's a little bit of a drunk, and he's also a little bit of a lush. He's a drunk and a lush, and also a little bit of a capitalist, because he now he is breaching the veil and letting people with money, humans with money, know that there's vampires out there, and that for a price he'll create them, or if he just gets bored he'll create them. So he's gone through and just made all of these little different vampires, including his familiar, it's a guy named Atticus, who just drives Miss Daisy around, shuffles him from place to place to do his business and collect his fees. And this goes okay. I mean, there's one mix up in the 70s where they basically turned a basketball team, and it didn't work out well for him. But
they created a basketball team.
Right? No, he turned a basketball team.
Turned them.
He accidentally, in a cocaine-fueled rage, made SIPs out of an entire team. But modern day times, everybody makes mistakes. Modern day times, he has become more low key, and he really is using this as a way to make money. Except he accidentally turns the wrong person. This young girl named Jennifer Rosen. I say young girl, she's a woman, but she's a social media influencer, and she's one of those people that found a way to make a living off YouTube and Snapchat and Insta and TikTok and everything else. She's got more than 2 million followers, and she pays Atticus Sloane a lot of money. a lot of money to turn her into a vampire, and he does. And I should say I misspoke. The driver's name is Joey. He's the kind of vampire that drives around in a Dodge Charger with a bumper sticker that says Tool on it. So he has at least good taste in music.
Nice.
But he turns this chick into a vampire, and literally within hours she is tweeting about it. She is throwing it up on her Insta page. She is blasting it out live, and she is going to do a quote-unquote live feeding. As you might imagine, this incurs the wrath of the firstborns of this little vampire government. And he can't fix it fast enough for them to get to him. And so they set our man up. Because there's also one more thing that these vampires will do as part of like the control of the SIPs. They will host their own feeding parties. And if they find out that there is a SIP present or around, they will kidnap said SIP and they will feed off that SIP. So the firstborn vampires will actually, in a weird, just kind of gross sense, an act of cannibalism in a way, they will feed off of these made vampires before they kill them. But a sire can't feed off his child. It'll make them sick. They can't do it. So as part of their, I don't know, I guess their monthly meeting or whatever, they bring in all the firstborns and they're going to feed off of this creature. Turns out to be one of Atticus's SIPs that he made, so he can't eat from it, and that's part of how they set him up. And they proceed to just pummel him. They beat the shit out of him, and one weird conversation with Bram Stoker later. He has been tasked with going through and finding all the SIPs that he's made in the past 50 years and dispatching them. And if he doesn't get them in time, he's got 30 days to do this. He's got to fight a clock. They are going to end his undead life. And again, half these folks that he created, he did so under the influence of something. So he, some type of drug. So he doesn't even remember them all. So he's got a mighty task at hand. So that's essentially the first issue in the setup of Bloodstained Teeth. This book was weird and it was awesome in all kinds of a fun way. I love the classism in the book, the way it separates the structures and the politics. I love the fact that Bram Stoker is in fact a character in the book. Bram Stoker's got a bodyguard. They call him, they give everybody titles. So like, Brother Stoker is First Counsel's head of public relations because he's an author. But his I guess you'd call him Muscle. I mean, that's what he is this guy named Mr. Tooth, who is a firstborn, just like meathead. The dude's like 6'7" and just like 400 pounds of beef, and he's a firstborn heavy. So he's an enforcer. The reason to pick this book up, though, to me, was not the reason I picked it up. Picked it up because it's a vampire story. I like Christian Ward. I've read some of his stuff before. I'm not familiar with Patrick Reynolds' art outside of this book, but the heavy lifting in this book, the thing that catches my eye the most is the coloring. Heather Moore drops just pure, bright, and shining kaleidoscope of color that she can get her hands on in this book, and it is erratic. It makes your eyes bounce all over the page. They are like the only darkness in this book is the ink that the sketchy lines are drawn in. It almost has it's not quite as refined, but it almost has a Greg Smallwood sensibility to it. But it's a little bit rougher. It's a little bit more, I would say, decomposed than Greg Smallwood stuff is. But the color that she pours into the page is just insane. I mean, it literally is like somebody taking a neon whirlwind and putting drunk goggles on you and asking you to walk down the street in the middle of it. Like that's the weird and crazy way I can describe it. I can't wait to see her do more colors. The layout of the book kind of has a Sean Phillips feel to it, somewhat. And in the book itself, when you apply the look and the colors, it has a little bit of a Sean Phillips nod to it. But it's like Sean Phillips, like on a rainbow meth. So, dude, I can't wait to see where this series goes. I'm I'm in love with the visage of it to the point that the story is secondhand to me, and that doesn't happen too often with vampire stories. But I'm going to pass this over to you and let you look at it. But it is some cool stuff. There's almost like a David Bowie vibe to the whole thing. It's nuts. And
this looks photo referenced.
A little bit. Yeah, it looks a little bit.
It looks totally photo referenced.
So I didn't recognize everybody who it might be.
I mean, look at that face looks. I mean, that up top right.
Are you talking about the driver?
Yeah.
I don't recognize him. I don't know who he's supposed to be if it is.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, this is
there's some Bowie in here, but I guess I just don't recognize enough people that it, and maybe the colors.
You got Bela Lugosi right there.
Oh no, Bela Lugosi was on purpose though.
Yeah.
I mean that's done purposefully. So, and I think Bela Lugosi might actually be a vampire in the story.
Oh, I would assume, yeah.
There's another little blip in the story in this guy who is a Bela Lugosi lookalike. And he wants to be a vampire. He spent his whole life trying to be a vampire, and no one will turn him. But he ends up in a ER after getting stabbed after walking down the back alley trying to get bit, and that plays a part into some ongoing portions of the story because he actually gets kidnapped because he knows too much. So that's going to pick up on the second issue, but it's just a wild ride, man. And again, the colors for me. Heather Moore, I want to see a lot more from her, pun intended from her name. But I really dug this book. It's a first issue. It's a great time to jump on. Go check it out at your local comic shop. It's fun stuff. It is fun stuff. It blends the expected with the unexpected. Also, you'll get a kick out of this because one of the weapons that they make him he's supposed to kill his sips with is a cattle spike. A la No Country for Old Men.
Oh wow!
So he has to go through and murder his quote unquote offspring with that. So fun stuff, man. Well, you ready to kind of bring this thing home?
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you talking me through those books that you talked about today. Love the short stacks. It's a fun time to be reading comics. Again, we want to send our condolences out to Neil Adams and. Just the terrible tragedy that happened with the car wreck. It's heartbreaking. Not with Neil, with Scott Mcleod.
Yeah.
With that family, that hurts. That hurts your heart, no matter who you are or where you are. But we hope you have enjoyed the last hour. Us talking about kind of the ongoings of the industry and some books that we read. As usual, next week, new books drop. Try to get to the comic shop on Wednesday when you can get your hands on them. And so we're going to end the show the way we always do, and we're going to start with Matt. He's going to tell me what he's going to grab this next week.
So this looks interesting. Metal Society. This is from Image Comics. The creative team on this is Zach Kaplan, Guilherme Balbi, Marco Lesko, and Christina Galada. I probably said that wrong. This is a a sci-fi, as Zach Kaplan I think only does. That's described as Blade Runner meets Rocky. In an inverted future, evolved robots have resurrected humans for manual labor. When a tribalistic cultural clash breaks out, a fearless human fighter and a frustrated, displaced robot will square off in public MMA-style sport fight of epic stakes to determine once and for all who reigns supreme, man or machine.
Okay.
Zach, have you read much Zach Kaplan?
I have not.
Anything I've read of his is always sci-fi with a moralistic, very clear moralistic tone to it.
Okay.
Most recently, and apparently this spins out of Port of Earth, which I read.
Okay, see, I didn't read that. I want to, though.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie District 9?
Yes, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a few years.
His stuff has a District 9 feel to it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a sci-fi with a very, very clear moral message type stuff.
I'm going to check that out. That actually sounds good. Plus, it's called Metal Society.
This will caught my attention, frankly.
So I wonder if they can tie this into the book that you are these like taxidermied automatons in the future? Is this a branch over?
Nope. It says resurrected humans.
Oh. Yeah. I want to see taxidermied automatons. So a book I've been excited about for a while comes out this next week, and it's getting a lot of praise, a lot of attention. They have had incredible I guess call it success in their first orders, so it's going to do well. They're going to make a lot of money off of it. But that is Twig by Scotty Young and Kyle Stram. Now, colors by John Francis Bellew, and Nate Picos did the letters. This is the book that they started on Substack when they first launched. So I've been, like, everybody knew, and they were very honest with it. Yeah, we're showing this on Substack, and then it's coming out. So if you're not on Substack, that's fine. You'll be able to see it. Being published by Image Comics. It's been compared to Bone. Jeff Smith's Bone-esque quest is what it's called. So the synopsis of it says it's the first day of Twig's new job as a journeyer on this Bone-esque quest to save the Dark Crystal / Labyrinth style world that he lives in. It's Scotty Young. If you've read Scotty Young stuff before, especially his own stuff, it gets crazy, it gets wild. I love Kyle Stram. This is a different Kyle Stram than I've ever seen. If you see the cover, it's this cute little critter-looking creature. Kind of Muppet-esque.
Yep.
I'm used to Kyle Stram drawing spread, or just the nasty. Like, he does really good horror stuff, so it's cool to see him do this.
Yeah.
I can't wait, and I love Kyle to death, love Scotty to death. Don't have to wish success on them because those dudes know how to turn air into money.
Yeah.
And they've done so again. But this is cute. I can't wait to get it. I'm kind of giddy. I need some cuteness in my life. So, we about ready to call it a day on this?
Think so.
All right. Well, if you have enjoyed this, and as always, we really hope you have, we would love to hear more from you because you love to hear more from us. Apparently, you keep coming back, and we appreciate it. But you can do so by heading over to our social media pages. We are Southern Fried Geekery. If you type that into the little search bar on your Facebook, you can find us. If you look up at SFG Podcast on both Twitter and Instagram, we have both of those. We're posting panels and we're talking stuff. And, you can shoot us an email at southernfriedgeekery@gmail.com. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to you. In fact, I owe somebody an email that are wanting to, got a couple of guys who wrote their own book and did their own stuff, and they're wanting to know if they can talk maybe next week.
Okay.
So I'm going to line that up and talk more about it with you and Craig later. To see what y'all think about it, because I think it'll be pretty cool. And they sent us the first issue. So, yes, I love free comics. They're great. So we'll get on that. But go check us out those places. As always, tell your friends. Word of mouth does great for spreading, podcasts. People that you trust will believe you if you tell them, hey, these 3 guys from Arkansas put out quality. So share it with your friends. And then, also, if you're doing like weird taxidermy, it's fun to listen to while you do that.
Exactly.
And we live in what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen taxidermy?
I've not seen much taxidermy outside of the traditional stuff.
Mine was a cat. I walked into a room I was staying in one time, and there was a taxidermied cat there.
Ooh.
I'll tell you a joke about that later. But also, my aunt has an albino possum or raccoon. It's raccoon. Albino raccoon stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So no one cares about that but me, but I thought it was fun. So anyway, go forth and love comics.
R.I.P. Neil Adams.
R.I.P. Neil Adams. Pick up his stuff, Go check it out at your local comic shop.